Hi, I'm Hope Cooper, and this is my artifact analysis presentation for MAE 670. During this, I'll be walking you through the courses I've taken during my plan of study, and then also discussing the growth I have experienced during that time. I will be showing you artifacts that I created during each course. To start off, this is just my plan of study table. It just shows all of the courses that I took, and then also the professional learning outcomes, the PLOs that they aligned with, and then the level of competency I felt I had after creating this artifact. These little letters, there's no I's, but I is introduced, D is developed, and then M is mastered. My first course was MAE 610, and that was Plan of Study and Practitioner Research. For this, my artifact was a research study review, and it aligned with PLO 3. For my second course, Introduction to Social Emotional Learning, I chose an annotated bibliography for my artifact, and that also aligned with PLO 3. And then for my third plan of study, ITI 672, Social Emotional Learning in Action, I chose a interventions research paper for my artifact, and that also aligned with PLO 3. My last SEL course was ITI 674, Research in Social Emotional Learning. And for this, my artifact was a research proposal, and it aligned with PLO 4. And then I started my reading courses. My first one was ARL 645, and that was Developing Fluency in Reading. For this, my artifact was a fluency lesson plan, and that aligned with PLO 2. ARL 646 followed that was my plan of study 6. This was comprehension strategies, and I chose a comprehension lesson plan for that artifact, and it also aligned with PLO2. And then I began my technology courses, so I started with EID 600, and that was Technology Foundations. My artifact for this was an online learning course, and then following that, I had EID 610, Instructional Design. This was an online course module that I created as well. And then for my last technology course, EID 650, this was media rich instruction, and I had an educational video for my artifact, and all three of those aligned with PLO 1. And then my final course that I'm taking right now, MAE 670, which is Applied Practitioner Research and Customized Study, I'm using my research proposal for my artifact, and that aligns with PLO 4. These next set of slides will focus on PLO 1, Professional Learning Outcome 1, which is my ability to integrate advanced approaches to instruction, assessment, and learning using digital tools and skills. The first artifact that aligns with PLO 1 was an online learning course that I created in EID 600, which is Technology Foundations. In this artifact, students learned how to identify emotions, how to self-regulate, and then they also got to create a situation in which they would apply strategies that they learned during the course. This course had students go through a lesson where they were introduced to emotions, and then they had some activities that followed up on that where they practiced identifying emotions, and then they had a lesson on how to deal with emotions, that self-regulation piece, and then they had some activities after that to apply that knowledge, and then there was a final assessment as well. This was all online. Students would do it all independently online. And this aligned with PLO 1 because the course module integrated an advanced approach to learning. It made the learning experience more effective, more engaging through the use of technology. I used several different digital tools such as Google Sites, Google Jamboard, Google Forms, Canva, and Unsplash, as well as using digital skills. Just using those tools and manipulating those tools and creating my final course module, and in an effective and productive way. For this, I gave myself an M because I felt like I spent so much time working on this and researching how to use different digital tools. And really, I created a course that I'm proud of. My second grade students, they went through it recently and they loved it. With some of my artifacts, I kind of, after I implemented it into my classroom, there were some things I wanted to change, but I really felt confident and comfortable with this, and my kids loved it. So I gave myself an M for mastered. And then I demonstrated competence by integrating advanced approaches to instruction, assessment, and learning with the use of many Google tools and the use of my digital skills as well. The next one that aligned with PLO 1 was from EID 610, Instructional Design, and this artifact was a paragraph writing online course module, so kind of similar to the last artifact that I talked about. And this is a course This was a course module that I created, and it teaches students how to write an effective topic sentence for a paragraph. It was just one module that I had to create that would have been a whole course if I had the time to do that. And this has students go through independently 2 lessons, 2 learning activities, an assignment, and then a final assessment. And this course also had like a homework menu that students could choose from to do during the course. It also had a separate page with anchor charts that the students could look back on as they were completing assignments or activities. And I used this with my own students, and I really liked it. But I did give myself a D developed because there were some things that I wanted to change after my kids worked with it. This artifact aligned with PLO1 because the course integrated advanced approaches to learning with technology. I achieved this by using several digital tools, like I mentioned in my last slide, which that's a main aspect of PLO1. I used Google Sites, Google Forms, Google Jamboard. I even used an online survey site, Canva, Unsplash. I used a lot of different digital tools and digital skills to create this advanced approach to learning. My digital skills that I used just included my ability to create a user-friendly, organized Google site, and then also effectively embed media in there in a user-friendly way. Like I mentioned earlier, I labeled this artifact as developed. I feel like my skills really improved when I created this artifact. However, I definitely felt like there was some room for improvement. I demonstrated competence through this artifact by creating an effective and engaging lesson that could be done remotely. I developed several informative lessons, engaging activities, and an authentic assessment using digital tools in my digital skills. The next artifact is from EID 650, Media Rich Instruction, and this artifact is a paragraph writing educational video. It's about 2 minutes long. It includes several different images, animations. It has my voiceover, music in the background, and then it's put on YouTube so that everybody can view it. I showed it to my own students, and they loved it. They loved hearing their own teacher's voice. It was like I was a celebrity for a day, but I definitely feel like it broke it down into manageable chunks, and it was something meaningful to the kids and easily understood. My students still refer back to it as we go through writing lessons. It aligned with PLO1 because it was an advanced approach to teaching with the use of technology, which is the main part of PLO1. Like I mentioned in the last 2 slides, I just used several different digital tools to create this, including Canva, Unsplash, YouTube, and then many of my digital skills were used as well, such as creating a Canva video with several different elements such as movement, animation, embedded media, voiceover, background music. And I also feel like I earned it. I labeled myself a D for this one. Developed. I felt like I demonstrated a lot of improvement, but um, similar to the last artifact, I definitely know I can still continue developing my skills. Technology is not something that comes super easily to me, so I plan to continue developing the skills that I practiced within this artifact. And then I think I demonstrated my competence with this artifact by creating a short but effective video that was aesthetic, user friendly. Through the use of digital tools, I think that I created an advanced approach to instruction with this video. This next set of slides is for PLO2, which is my ability to design learning experiences that include learner characteristics, principles of customized learning, and assessment of learning. The first artifact that I felt like aligned with this PLO was from the course ARL 645, Developing Fluency in Reading. The artifact I chose for this course was a fluency lesson plan. During this lesson plan, I used readers' theaters to improve student fluency. During explicit teaching instruction, I explained and modeled what fluency was, how it should sound, explaining how we stop at punctuations. We read with expression at a good pace, not too fast, not too slow. And I also had students watch a video on the topic just to kind of cement in what I was explaining. And this was a really fun lesson for my explicit teaching. Me and an aide, we modeled performing a play because that's what the students were going to be doing. And then for guided practice, we watched a video that was set up to practice fluency. So different sentences came up on the screen, and all of us collectively, we read it using our fluent fluency skills that we just learned about. And then after each passage, I would explain what we did well, what we needed to work on or change. And then after that, kids were put into groups based on their reading levels, and each group received different plays that met their needs, that were at their reading levels. And they practiced for a few days, and then they got to perform it in front of everybody. This aligned with PLO2 because it was a learning experience that involved student characteristics. Many parts of the lesson was differentiated to meet the needs of all the students. There were different groups, different plays, different assessments for all of the kids to meet them where they're at, and that's what PLO2 is based on. The learning I developed in this lesson plan, was customized to meet their needs. I identified this as M, mastered, because I used this lesson plan with my students and I felt like it was very effective and engaging. All of my students were challenged but still able to experience success and excitement. And I was able to get really valuable and authentic data based on the customized assessment included in this lesson. I showed competence by creating an effective learning experience that was customized, and I created a lesson that considered student difference for learning as well as for assessment. The next artifact also aligns with PLO2, and this was also from a reading course, ARL 646, Comprehension Strategies. And the artifact was a comprehension lesson plan. It focused on students being able to answer and ask the W questions like who, what, where, when, to better understand key details in a text. It taught the students how to create visuals or mind movies in their heads as they listened to a story or as they were reading a story. And then the lesson involved students watching a quick introduction video, listening to a mini lesson on mind movies, and why it's important to be able to create pictures in our heads. And then students watch me break down a paragraph and explain what important details I pictured in my head. And then during guided practice, they listened to a short story and they got to highlight the details they felt were important. And then we talked about what we pictured in our heads. Students then got to read another passage and create a comic strip of the images they saw in their mind movies as they read the passage. And they had some choice in that. They got to decide if they wanted to draw it out like the picture on the right, or if they wanted to use an online format, Pixton, to create their comic. I felt like this aligned with PLO2 because the lesson was differentiated to meet the needs of all my students. It was also created with learner characteristics in mind. The passages that were read were at or slightly below the students' reading level so that they were able to feel successful and they weren't too focused on trying to read the passage. And it included things that students had prior knowledge about. I teach at a Title I school, so it's kind of hard to talk about airplanes because they have no background knowledge on that. So I tried to keep that in the back of my mind as I was creating this lesson. And then this lesson was also customized to kind of meet their needs, but also to meet their preferences. Student had some choice and control over their learning. They were able to choose how they created their comic strip. And then it also had a pre-test and post-test, which acted as an assessment that could provide me some authentic data. For this, I gave myself a D. I gave this lesson to my class, and there was definitely some things that I could change and some room for improvement. But I showed competence in this artifact by creating a meaningful lesson that met the needs of all my students by including differentiation, offering choice in their assignment, and then taking the time to choose content that was relevant to all of their lives. Now we're going to talk about PLO3 in the next couple of slides, and this is my ability to apply practitioner research methods to study and inform instruction in traditional and digital learning environments. The first artifact that aligned with PLO3 was from MAE 610, my first course, Plan of Study and Practitioner Research. This artifact I analyzed was my research study review. This artifact had the purpose of identifying the relationship between the implementation of cooperative learning-based teaching of social emotional skills and the measurement of disruptive behaviors for elementary age learners. I reviewed an article that explored the relationship between teaching SEL and student behavior because it's a topic that I feel like is very relevant in my school as well as a lot of other elementary schools. It's something that we're seeing, issues with behaviors we're seeing everywhere ever since COVID happened, and I think I was really interested in finding out how to help those students and how to help teachers become more successful with this issue. So in this paper, I summarized what was being studied, who the participants were, what methods were used, what measures and procedures were used, and then I also explained the findings and limitations of the study. I think that this aligned with PLO3 because I applied research methods to study and inform my intended question. I found a relevant research study that had the same independent variable, the same dependent variable as my practitioner question, and that informed my instruction as well as my understanding of students in both traditional and digital learning environments. This was my very first class, and I hadn't really had much experience yet with research and finding good studies, so I felt like my skills shifted from an I to a D, but I did not master the skills yet with this artifact, so I kept it as a DU developed. I demonstrated my competence by finding a recent and relevant research study that accurately that aligned with what I was looking for, and then I accurately summarized the main aspects of that study, and I was able to use it to inform my practitioner question as well as inform my instruction in my classroom. The next artifact that aligned with PLO3 was from ITI 670, which was Introduction to Social Emotional Learning. And the artifact I used was an annotated bibliography. It included 5 different research studies, and they were all related to my intended question for that course. And the question was how it asked how classroom management and how classroom environment impacted a student's ability to self-regulate. So really asking how classroom management and self-regulation kind of work together, how they're related. And then the 5 studies were each summarized and evaluated, and that's kind of where I explained the limitations of the study and then how well it aligned with my question of interest. Did it align with my independent and dependent variables, or was it a little bit off? And then this aligned with PLO3 because during this assignment, I had to do a lot of research finding 5 relevant studies that really aligned with what I was exploring and what I was interested in. This research informed my question as well as my instruction, like I mentioned in the last research paper that I just talked about. And I learned that classroom management really can impact self-regulation in students, and that's something I've definitely taken into consideration this year with my students and applied to my current classroom. I gave myself a D for developing on this. And similar to what I explained, I just feel like there was some room for growth. I was still getting into the hang of research finding. And then I demonstrated competence by showing my ability to refine my research skills and finding a lot of good studies that accurately met the needs that I needed them to meet, and then also summarizing those studies and using them to inform my intended question and inform my teaching right now. This next slide is for ITI 672, SEL in Action, Social Emotional Learning in Action. And the artifact I analyzed for this course was an evidence-based interventions research paper. That's a lot of words, so I'll break it down. It was a research paper that talked about a specific intervention you can use, a specific SEL intervention you can use in the classroom. During this artifact really dug deep about temperature checks, which is basically when students come and check in with you, either expressing how they're feeling using a scale 1 through 5 or using a mood meter. And the paper explains how teachers can effectively implement it in their classroom for struggling students. And it also includes supporting research that shows how impactful this intervention can be when implemented correctly, and how you can decide when a student really needs this intervention. I felt this aligned with PLO3 because I applied research methods to find the studies that supported this intervention, and I used those to inform instruction in the learning environment in my classroom as well. And then this research, it was reviewed by me, it was summarized, and then it was also connected to instruction for teachers like me. I identified this as an M because I felt like I really had refined my researching skills by this point, finding these supporting research papers to promote this evidence-based intervention. And I demonstrated competence by using effective research methods to inform my instruction and inform the topic that I was exploring. The next set of slides is for PLO4, which is my ability to develop reflective practices that are grounded in current learning science research, professional ethics, and include pathways to continuous growth. So for this first one, the first artifact that aligned with this PLO was from ITI 674, which is research in SEL, which is research in social emotional learning. Sorry, I keep cutting that down. And this slide analyzes my research proposal for that course. This proposal was centered on the question, how can implementation of goal setting and self-evaluation impact student behavior? So I was focusing more specifically on individual skills within social emotional learning instead of the whole SEL curriculum. I was really focusing on goal setting and self evaluation and how that directly impacted student behavior. Um, in this, as you can see, I have an introduction. I had my problem statement, my research question, the framework that I was basing my research on, which was the Castle framework. And then I also included an annotated bibliography with 7 research studies, and then the methods and procedures I plan to use for the research being proposed. And it also had my final reflection and my summary. This aligned with PLO4 because the research was conducted and the findings allowed me to really reflect on my own practices and my teaching since the findings were relevant. And the question that I was asking and aiming for was relevant to me as well. And this research proposal allowed me to develop pathways to continuous growth and continuous gains of knowledge, which is a main aspect of PLO4. I identified this as a D for developed because I just felt like I had after reading, it was a really long, as you can see, it's like an 18-page paper. And after I turned it in, there were some things that I might have shifted or I might have changed after reading further research studies, like, oh, I liked this amount of participants more. So just kind of some more room for growth, definitely. And I demonstrated competence with this artifact just by finding research studies. There were 7 in there that I analyzed, finding those research studies that aligned with my intended question of interest, and then using that information to really reflect on my instruction as well as guide my proposal, and that proposal that would allow me to continue down a path of continuous growth, which again is a big part of PLO4. And then my final artifact that I'll be discussing is from my current class, MAE 670, Applied Practitioner Research and Customized Study. This artifact was a practitioner research proposal that I just created, and it has the intent of exploring the relationship between cooperative learning-based teaching of social emotional skills and the measurement of disruptive behavior in elementary age students. This is really relevant to me because I teach elementary age students, and like I mentioned before, we've really seen a shift in student behavior. They're lacking those SEL skills, so I was really interested in seeing how we could possibly help them, how teaching social emotional skills could impact them and their success. And this had 3 different sections. Section 1 explained the purpose of the paper, explaining what it was focusing on, why I was writing it. And then section 2 was a review of 5 research studies, just listing the question of the study, the participants who were in the study, the independent variables, the findings, the limitations, and then also the implications for further research. And then section 3 explained the purpose of the proposal and kind of connected to the implications that I discussed in the section 2. And it was just to further understand the relationship between teaching SEL skills and student behavior. And then this section had the proposed research timeline, the proposed participants, procedures, and how the findings would be measured. I believed that this aligned with PLO4 because I conducted a lot of research and analyzed many studies, which helped me to learn and reflect on my current understanding as well as reflect on my teaching. And one main aspect of PLO4 is including pathways to continuous growth, and I believe that the research that I studied will help me to continue growing as a teacher. I learned a lot of really valuable information reading those studies and finding those studies, and I was also able to really reflect on how my instruction was impacting my students using those research-based materials. I also created a proposal that would allow me to continue my learning and continue developing as an educator. I identified this as M because I feel like at this point, I've really refined my research skills and become very aware of how things impact my teaching. I really used it to reflect on how I was impacting my students. I was researching something that was very important to me and essential to understand in my career. And I feel like I showed competence by collecting the necessary information to develop a plan as well as learn valuable information that could help me to become a better educator. So thank you for listening.